Yes, yes, hello, welcome back. This is Chris Herrera. I got to tell you right now, I am really into this plugin, Smack Attack by Waves. The thing is just everything that I'm looking for in a transient designer plugin. This little monster has got all the jam. I love the math, I love the sound, I love the flexibility. Everything about this thing does exactly what I need when I need it. Just a quick overview. You've got your attack, and the as you raise the attack, it's going to sharpen things. As you lower the attack, it's going to roll off the transient. Same with the sustain on this side. As you increase the sustain, you're going to get more of the tail of things. As you lower the sustain, you're going to get a tighter, more staccato impression of a line. One thing that's important to point out is that this has a sensitivity, so it's going to read. So, for instance, I'm at 60.5 right now. You'll notice if I move these lines, it's going to set a threshold by which the waveform conforms. So I was at like 60.5 on this thing. I'm going to put it back there. And then the same with the sensitivity. So this line is going to determine just how much throw is going to be accepted. Think of it as the threshold on a compressor. It's like above this threshold, I'm beginning my compression curve. Below this threshold, I'm bringing things up. This is just kind of how the plugin works. So, going to hit compare here, go back to where I was on this thing. So yes, just quick overview, attack, sustain. They have independent sensitivity controls. You've got your output to compensate for if things get too hot or if they start to get rolled off too much and too quiet, losing their attack. You can use makeup gain. Beautiful, easy, no problem there. Dry wet mix, no nuance there. It is worth going over this really, really quick. You've got your needle, nail, and blunt. And then you've got your linear, non-linear, and soft linear. And then the duration, let's just go through them really quickly here. So on the attack side of things, needle, that's going to be kind of what it sounds like. It's going to take the transient and just grab it real fast. Really sharp attacks, really big pushes on the transient smacks. Nail is going to be a little more musical. It's going to give you a little more of a roll off, a little more of a musical tail on the overall envelope of the sound. And then you're going to have this blunt, which it's visualized beautifully. It's kind of a slower on and like a longer off. And the duration is again in milliseconds. So the relationship between the curve that you choose and the duration, you kind of want to think of the duration a little bit as a dry wet on each one of those curves. So that's what's going on with these attack shapes and the sustain shapes. Now, the sustain shape's the same thing. You're going to have your linear, which decays at a perfectly linear rate. You're going to have your nonlinear, which, depending on the sustain level, nonlinear can provide a rapid or a more gentle curve. Still, again, kind of aimed at drums. And then this beautiful soft limiter. It has a softer peak and a softer linear fall. So it moves the attack sound towards the tail of the transient. So this tool can be really good for drums, but actually it shines more with non-percussive elements, which we'll see here in the future. And the durations of both of them, kind of want to think of them as a massage curve, as like a little bit of a dry wet, depending on which curve is chosen. The durations will accentuate the power of that curve, or it will lighten the power of that curve. I feel like the best way to explain what this plugin is capable of is to actually just put it through its paces on a handful of different sound sources. Now, I have mentioned before how much I am not keen on using transient designers on full loops. We're going to make an exception to the rule here. This plugin actually functions beautifully on loops. So here I put together this little drum and bass loop. It's just right off a sample pack. And we're going to throw it in solo. I'm going to bypass the smack attack. I'm going to leave this bit of EQ on. And let's just listen to what it does. All right, pretty standard, very cool. Now, here's the curve that I've created for the smack attack. With it in, with it out. So in this particular instance, even though it's a full drum mix, even though it's kick, snare, hats, reverb, all of the different elements that are baked into the loop, it really functions nicely. I really, as I've mentioned before, I am not a huge advocate of using transient designers on, say, a drum bus, but this would be a drum bus, right? This would be a complete drum mix, kick, snare, hat, reverbs, all of it. Even though I'm not an advocate of that, when it comes down to using it on loops, this thing really performs. So all I've really done here is pumped up the attack just to bring a little bite out of the attacks of the drums. And then I've rolled down the sustain to kind of ease the tails and create a little bit of space and staccato and air between each stroke. On the attack side, I've got it set on needle with a very light duration. On the sustain side, I've got it set here to non-linear, which again, the graphics represent very beautifully what is happening in terms of the sustain and its relationship to the duration. I want you to think of the sustain curves as a fade, right? So if you were to write a fade to a piece of audio, oftentimes they have a very strong linear, straight down triangular fade, and then you can actually adjust the curve of that fade. So for instance, you could have the curve of the fade dip in faster and a converse fade where it dips a little bit faster. And then you could have sort of an inverse fade where it has a little bit of a lighter and longer roll off. So that's kind of how I want you to wrap your mind around what's happening with these duration curves.